Salams and revolutionary greetings to all listening in or watching. My name is Noor Ahmad and I am the coordinator for the Palestine Solidarity Alliance, PSA, based here in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I'm also the host of the 74 Years of Al-Nakba show today. A little bit of background for those who might not be aware of who we are and what we do. The PSA is a nonprofit human rights organization which runs projects and campaigns with the aim of creating awareness and understanding of the injustices and oppression suffered by the people of Palestine. Since our inception in 2001, post the World Conference Against Racism held in Durban, we have embarked on numerous solidarity programs, advocacy marches, and lobbying campaigns, as well as much needed relief projects both in Palestine and local communities here in South Africa. Our aim is to support the Palestinian people in their struggle for liberation, and as a human rights organization, we promote values of anti-racism and work to promote human rights, freedom, justice, and equality for all, irrespective of race, religion, or culture. Today is the 15th of May, also known as Nakba Day for the Palestinians. The Nakba is an Arabic term which is used to describe the catastrophe of 1948 when Zionist gangs perpetrated a genocidal assault on the indigenous people of Palestine, wreaking havoc in the Palestinians' lives, causing mass destruction, murder, and the forced removal of tens of thousands of Palestinians from their homes and villages. Much of this was hidden from the world, but the Palestinian resistance movement has kept the memory alive by commemorating the Nakba and demanding the right of return for all Palestinians. Today, Palestinians continue to suffer the indignity of living under an apartheid settler colonial state, which is enforced by a military occupation and apartheid laws. There is an ongoing displacement, home demolitions, religious and racial discrimination, and ethnic cleansing, which privileges Israelis and the illegal Israeli Jewish settlers. Palestinians commemorate the Nakba on the 15th of May, the day after Israel celebrates the creation of its illegal state. The Nakba is a foundational event in the history of Palestine and of Israel. While many may be unfamiliar with the term, it is a central element of Palestinian collective identity. The Nakba is present not only in the memories of Palestinians, both within and outside of Israel, but it is a palpable physical presence throughout Israel, if only one looks with fresh eyes at the way in which Palestinians are treated in Israel, helped by the discriminatory apartheid laws and legislature, which prevents them from having the same rights as Jewish Israelis. A lot of this centers around the inability of Palestinians to own their own land. Much of Israel bears traces of the Nakba, even if people aren't aware of them. We just have to look at pictures of ruins of Palestinian villages, often in the background of newer Israeli settled towns and cities, which have become a testament to the ways in which Palestinian life has been overwritten and erased. We see it in the renaming of Palestinian towns, cities, and villages, and in the appropriation and takeover of Palestinian food and culture, which is why we maintain it is Al-Quds and not Jerusalem. It is Al-Khalil and not Hebron. It is Jaffa and not Tel Aviv, and it is Al-Nasra and not Nazareth. The Nakba is thus a very current and important commemorative day in the Palestinian calendar and a very important day for us as a Palestine Solidarity movement. In this regard, as part of our commemoration of the Nakba Day, we are hosting this radio program to talk a bit more about the Nakba, but also to hear from voices on the ground in Palestine on the Nakba, the right of return for all Palestinians, Palestinian resilience, and resistance in the face of continued illegal occupation and apartheid. We will also be hearing from our comrades in Zimbabwe on the work that they are doing in the solidarity movement on the ground there. To start off, we're going to watch a video which delves into the Nakba and explains it a bit more, after which we will hear from our first panelist.
70 years have passed since the Nakba, the catastrophe in Arabic, took place in Palestine in 1948, in which more than 750,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced from their homes and pushed into refugee camps in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and neighboring countries. But the Nakba didn't end in 1948. The catastrophe continues to affect more than 12 million Palestinians, who remain stateless today. Historical Palestine was mostly made up of Palestinian Muslims, Christians, and a small number of Jews, who generally lived together peacefully. The persecution of Jews across Europe led them to believe that they were not safe there, and Zionists saw Palestine as a prime location for a Jewish homeland.
and it was clear that there were Palestinians on the land, Zionist leaders and common people alike got used to the idea that the only way of making Palestine a Jewish state is by causing the Palestinians to leave.
The Jewish Zionist movement began organizing immigration and buying land in Palestine. This was the first step in turning Palestine into a Jewish homeland. Then World War I began. Britain promised Zionist support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. This came as a formal political letter known today as the Balfour Declaration. It also included that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. When World War I ended and the Ottoman Empire was defeated, Britain occupied Palestine.
Britain provided the muscle under which they could simply emigrate. I mean, they couldn't have immigrated were it not for the British presence, because the crucial battle in the early stages was simply getting Jews into Palestine and acquiring land. They couldn't have done that without British government's sponsorship.
Jewish migration into Palestine continued for decades, and the Palestinian people organized large demonstrations against this influx. Palestinians saw British support of Zionism as biased and unfair. So the people of Palestine revolted in 1936 to fight against British and Zionist occupation. During the 3-year uprising, thousands of Palestinians were killed, and hundreds of British citizens and Jewish Zionists died as well. Britain dismantled the Palestinian Revolution, leaving them with no political or military leadership. However, the British also began limiting Jewish migration. This upset the Jews who had fought with the British during the uprising and led them to create their own forces. Zionist militias carried out bombing attacks against both the British and the Palestinians. As things got out of hand, the British announced in 1947 that they'd be ending their mandate on Palestine. The file on Palestine was then transferred to the UN, which suggested dividing Palestine into an Arab and Jewish state. As the British were preparing to leave, the new Jewish population began taking over, and it helped that they were heavily armed. The ethnic cleansing of Palestinians began months before the British officially left Palestine.
A lot of resources similar to what you have watched exist on the internet, which will help you gain a broader picture of not just the Nakba, but also Palestinian history as well. You can also visit our website, www.palestinesa.co.za, for more resources and information. Our first guest is Mahmoud Nwaja, who is the BDS National Committee General Coordinator, a board member of the Stop the Wall and Settlement Anti-Apartheid campaign, co-founder of the Youth Forum, Youth Mobilizer, and Human Rights Defender. How are you doing, Comrade Mahmoud?
Hi, Noor, and thank you very much for having me. Greeting to you and to all our comrades, brothers and sisters of South Africa, who fight now for our rights and who fought before.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
70 years have passed since the Nakba, the catastrophe in Arabic, took place in Palestine in 1948, in which more than 750,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced from their homes and pushed into refugee camps in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and neighboring countries. But the Nakba didn't end in 1948. The catastrophe continues to affect more than 12 million Palestinians, who remain stateless today.
Sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties. How are you doing, Comrade Mahmoud? I couldn't hear you before.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Noor, and greetings from Palestine to you and to all our comrades, brothers and sisters in South Africa who fight for our human rights and who fought before for a free South Africa and against the apartheid regime. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here and taking the time out to just chat to us a little bit about this very, very important day. Can you give people a little bit of a background on what the Nakba is, why today is so significant for Palestinians?
So it is the 74th years of Nakba. It started in 1948. It started off displacement, ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, especially from the villages in the what's known now as 1948, in different places, which result into almost 50% of the Palestinian population become refugees in whether in the 1967 in the West Bank and Gaza, or in Jordan, Syria, and elsewhere. And that is also a representation of the ongoing repression of the Israeli apartheid, settler colonialism apartheid regime against us. And just to note that the Nakba is an ongoing event from 1948 until now, because Israel colonial violence and naked aggression have never stopped. But neither our resistance against that repression in different places. Within Al-Quds, Silwan, in Naqab, now it's happening in Masafir Yatta after they announced that they are going to ethnic cleanse all the population in that area, which is really a huge area. We are talking about 8 villages. That the decision was just taken a week ago, and now people are struggling against that decision because they want to make that the whole area as a military zone. So we stand united against the ongoing ethnic cleansing. In scenes early similar to last May, when Palestinian facing and resisting apartheid Israeli violence, aggression, and also desecration of our holy sites. That happened also in Ramadan and during April. So it's like an ongoing events and ongoing Nakba and ongoing resistance against all Israeli repression. During April alone, apartheid Israel murdered at least 23 Palestinians, including 3 women and 2 children. Violently suppressed demonstration, desecrated the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and assault Palestinians as they worshipped. It also embarked a campaign of mass arrest, including the arrest of almost 500 Palestinians in and around Al-Aqsa compound, and once again it bombed the Palestinian population of besieged Gaza. So when we talk about the Nakba, it started in 1948, and it's an ongoing event because Israel even become a more oppressor. They built a settler colonialism apartheid regime, where now they are building more settlements in the West Bank, and they are expanding these settlements, where we only left with almost 3% of the historical Palestine. So it's an ongoing event, and there is an ongoing resistance to this violent repression.
Thank you for that, Comrade Mahmoud. And can you tell us a bit more about, you just mentioned the 8 villages that are under threat of being ethnically cleansed?
So there is what we call Masafir Yatta, where I'm originally from. Masafir Yatta is an 8 villages to the South Hebron hills of Al Khalil of Hebron, and there was a court hearing, and we know that the courts in Israel, the judges, and all the injustice that we are receiving from there is part of the whole injustice Israeli system and apartheid regime. So they refuse in the hearing. They refuse the people demands, because the people lived there like even before 1948, and now they declare the area as a military zone. So this is one of the things that how they ethnic cleanse Palestinian, whether they use the apartheid wall to confiscate more lands, especially lands with natural resources and with a strategic place, land where they can grab for settlement and to build a new settlement or for settlement expansion. And now they are using the military zone as an excuse to confiscate this land, which is Al-Masafir. So they already have that decision, and now we are we will having another decision on the 15th of July. So we'll start campaigning from now to pressure them. What's most important of this to have an international pressure, because if we mount much of international pressure, something may change, the same as happened with Khan al-Ahmar. But this is a different area, because it's a different situation, because this is a huge area that all together we need to defend. There are almost 1,800 people live there with their families, and also with their cattle. So this means that ethnic cleansing this number of people mount to a war crime, and it is ethnic cleansing. It's clearly ethnic cleansing that they will be. I mean, before that there was like an apartheid and racial discrimination against people there. They are forbidden from accessing our own water. They were really pressured by the occupation army. They were attacked on daily basis by Israeli settlers from the nearby settlement. There already there was like this huge pressure against people live there to leave their area, to leave their places, and people refused, and they stood there. And now they're having this decision by the court that they're aiming to ethnic cleansing them by force.
Yeah, but I mean, we know that Israeli courts are never in the favor of Palestinians, and that their sort of justice system, which isn't even a justice system because it's not just, doesn't actually look out for the rights of Palestinians, and it focuses more on the ensuring that there's continued ethnic cleansing and just the human rights violations of the Palestinians. So you mentioned that you will start campaigning from the 15th of July. What can we do?
We already start campaigning now. So the most important from now until the 15th of July, because there will be another court hearing. So we need to mount some global pressure against them. So just to make them rethink about their decisions.
So the court hearing is on the 15th of July. So what can we as the international community, as people who are involved in the solidarity movement, do to help with this campaign?
I mean, what's really most important is that just to keep remind people of BDS, because we are now marked the 74th anniversary of Nakba. We remind the world of the growing global consensus that Israel is committing the crime of apartheid. That was very clear from Amnesty reports and Human Rights Watch reports. So it's an apartheid regime against all Palestinians, with the Palestinians who live in 1967. 38 of Palestinians live in 1967, occupied territories, West Bank and Gaza, West Bank including Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and then against also Palestinians who live in Israel and have an Israeli citizenship, and against Palestinian refugees. 50% of our people are refugees. So we reiterate our call on governments to impose lawful and targeted sanction on Israel, for the UN to launch an investigation into Israel apartheid and the escalation of the BDS campaign globally in order to isolate apartheid Israel until we attain freedom, justice and equality. So what is needed for people to do is not only for Masafer Yatta, but to stop going Nakba is essentially BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And sanction is the most important now, because Israel is I mean, they assassinated Shireen Abu Akleh while she's a journalist, a veteran journalist from Al Jazeera, and you heard about that, and they just sniped her. So we need to stop this impunity, and to stop this impunity, we need sanctions against Israel. So we need to pressure governments to pressure parliament to sanction Israel, and to push the UN to investigate Israeli apartheid. We need to talk about with our officials, representative officials, about Masafer Yatta and the ongoing ethnic cleansing there. So they need to pressure and do sanctions against Israel. And also, just to keep in mind, it's really important for us now to start the UN, to pressure the UN to start investigate Israeli apartheid, because from there we can start sanctions against this regime.
Yeah, definitely. I think we saw that with Apartheid South Africa, where while work was being done on the ground with freedom fighters who were fighting against the apartheid system, a lot of it was also international pressure through boycotts, disinvestment, and sanctions, which helped bring about the end of apartheid in South Africa. And it's very unfortunate that when we talk about BDS from a Palestinian context, it's become a very controversial thing where it was okay for people to boycott and apartheid South Africa, but somehow the international community is remaining silent when it comes to apartheid Israel. So there's a bit of a double standard there, but hopefully through continued efforts and through solidarity on the ground, we can see some improvement and some progress on that front. Just the solidarity movement in South Africa was outside the Israeli embassy just yesterday, and we also handed over a memorandum to the Department of International, to the Director General of the Department of International Relations here, calling for sanctions and calling for the closure of the Israeli embassy and cutting of all ties with the Israeli government. So I think that, like you said, continued pressure will hopefully help. You've mentioned a number of times the apartheid wall, and you also said that you are a member of the Stop the Wall campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about that campaign?
So the anti-apartheid wall campaign is a campaign launched in 2002, and it's a co-founder of the BDS movement. It's mainly work in steadfastness and support people on the ground, mobilization, and bring people together, establish local committee, defend Palestinian land, and also to be part of the popular resistance. And it's already also taking a global campaign like Wall Without Walls with partners in Mexico, and especially in Latin America and different places. And they are a very important part, playing a very important part in the BDS movement. So it's also a campaign that represents Palestinian youth. There is inside this, it's like the campaign itself is hosting the Palestinian Youth Forum, which is a youth platform that is also leading youth activities against occupation and some other activities related to social situation. So it is mainly focused on protecting people lands, do mobilization as part of the mass popular resistance in Palestine against occupation and Israeli apartheid regime, and also leading global campaigns related to support BDS campaign and also to support Palestinian struggles on the ground. No, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can now. Yeah.
I was just saying, is there anything else you would like to add before we watch the second part of the video that was playing and move on to Comrade
No,
Aya?
you already talked about South Africa, but there is a colonial hypocrisy is happening now, and the indifferences between Palestinian and the Western indifferences to Palestinian in comparing to what's happening in Ukraine, the sanctions against Russia. That is enabling Israel impunity and directly contributing to our ongoing Nakba. I mean, it's like there is a huge hypocrisy happening in the Western, and it's about a global complicity, because they are complicit with Israel. There is impunity, and because they are not sanctioning Israel, or not, they are even protecting Israel. Not only they are preventing anyone from do sanction against Israel, and they are delegitimizing the BDS movement, which is a non-violent human rights movement, clearly legit everywhere. They keep supporting Israel while they witnessing our ongoing Nakba every day. So what we are calling, we reiterate our call for a meaningful solidarity with Palestinians facing ethnic cleansing, massacres, colonial dispossession, and apartheid, and we are calling the world to stop their hypocrisy and to stand with the oppressed Palestinian. But this is mainly a call for people of conscience and countries that is supporting Palestinian struggle, and we are not waiting the Western hypocrites to stand with us, because they will stay deeply complicit with Israel until we pressure them that hard, until we change the public opinion, and it is changing now toward our struggle and toward support a free Palestine.
Definitely. I think you're very right in what you've said about there being Western hypocrisy. We saw the world immediately want to impose boycotts against Russia because of the Ukrainian war, and Palestinians have been calling for boycotts and sanctions for a very, very long time. But hopefully, through the comparison of both of the situations, we can expose this kind of hypocrisy and show people that boycotts again and sanctions against Israel is just as important. Thank you so much, Comrade Mahmoud. We're now going to play the second part of the video that we watched earlier, after which we will go out to Aya Al-Gazzawi, who will be joining us from Gaza.
Zionists were taking over major cities and hundreds of villages, forcing thousands of Palestinians into neighboring countries.
It happened many times that the Israeli, very holy soldiers took 10 of the youngsters in the middle of the village, shot them just in order to kill them, in order that all the others will see it and run away. And if it's not enough, they took others also.
The British ended their mandate on May 14, 1948, leaving their tanks and armored weapons to the newly created State of Israel. From the time the British occupied Palestine in 1917 to when they left in 1948, the number of Jews is estimated to have multiplied 10 times to 500,000. As Zionist Jews declared the State of Israel on May 14, 1948, the surrounding Arab nations declared war, with the objective of liberating Palestine. Although Palestine had the support of other Arab nations and they outnumbered the Jewish population, the Israelis also had foreign military, political, and financial support.
They were a highly prepared, highly dedicated, well-armed fighting force, which was superior to all the Arab armies combined.
Israel grew beyond the UN partition lines during the Arab-Israeli War by destroying Arab villages and further reducing the Palestinian population. By April 1949, more than 500 villages and 10 cities were captured by the Israelis. Over 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes, and over 13,000 Palestinians had been killed. Even then, the Nakba did not end. Today, Israel occupies the whole of historical Palestine. Israelis continue to build illegal settlements on occupied Palestinian territories. Palestinians in the West Bank live under military law, which subjects them to checkpoints, curfews, and arbitrary arrests. Palestinians in Gaza live under a blockade imposed by Israel. Gaza is set to become unlivable by 2020. Palestinians today continue to demand their right to return to their homes. For them, the Nakba will not end until this right is granted.
Apologies to our viewers for the lack of visuals, but we were able to hear the rest of that video. We're not going to talk to Aya Al-Gazzawi, who is a BDS Palestinian activist, writer, teacher, and refugee in Gaza. She has a bachelor degree in English language and literature from Al-Aqsa University. Salams, Aya, how are you doing?
Thank you very much for having me today with you, and thank you very much for the excellent, brilliant introductory video about the Palestinian Nakba.
Thank you, Aya. Can you tell us a little bit about just life in Gaza? Actually, start by telling us a little bit about your history. You mentioned to me just the meaning of your name and how you are a refugee in Gaza. So if you could tell our viewers a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as today marks the 74th anniversary of the Palestinian Nakba, and as we're talking now, it means something very important, not for us as a whole, as the entirety of the Palestinian people, but also it touches me very sensitively and deeply as a person. Because as you've just mentioned, I am a refugee living in the Gaza Strip. I come originally from Mafa, which was ethnically cleansed back in 1948 As also Mahmoud just said, that in 1948, Israeli Haganas and Ashtrons and gangs ethnically cleansed about 750,000 Palestinians of their homelands and wiped more than 500 villages. So the establishment of Israel came at the expense of the Palestinian blood and ruins of Palestinian homes. As Israel celebrates this day as its Independence Day, we Palestinians now commemorate it as our Nakba Day. And the sad part about it is that the Nakba is still ongoing. It hasn't finished. It just started in 1948, and even before that, under the British mandate, as it paved the way before Israel to establish a home for it on the Palestinian land. So, but luckily, my surname is Al-Gazzawi, which, as you can tell, related to Gaza. It's more like an adjective, or more of like a nationality, but mostly an adjective of the word Gaza in English. And as we Palestinians live in Gaza, it's very dramatic. Living under siege and experiencing the Nakba in multiple ways. As you know, Palestinians have been scattered ever since Palestinian Nakba in 1948. And half of the Palestinian people live in the diaspora, while the other half are in Gaza, the West Bank, and inside what is known now as Israel. As for Gaza, it has a population of 2,300,000 people. 2/3 of them are refugees, and 80% of the population here are reliant on international aid. So the small area of Gaza, and this population, a huge population, makes it actually the largest open-air prison and the most densely concentration camp on earth. Basically, Israel has imposed on us a hermetic siege since 2007, and it sees us as surplus because we remind Israel constantly about its original sin, which is basically the Palestinian Nakba. So we are the unwanted population, indigenous population, and to many of Israelis inside the Israeli community, we constitute actually a demographic threat. So Gaza has been left to suffer from intolerable conditions, especially due to the siege. It has touched and affected every aspect of life, including movement, water, economics, employment, education, medical treatment, everything. For example, Gaza has 7 crossings. 6 of these crossings are controlled entirely by Israel, while the 7th one is controlled by the Egyptian authorities. Palestinians in Gaza cannot get out of Gaza or come in, and they cannot move, they cannot visit their relatives, they cannot go to places freely as they want. Many students have lost their scholarships because they couldn't leave the Gaza Strip. Even the patients' lives are endangered while waiting for the Israeli authorities to issue permits to to allow them to leave the Gaza Strip, whether to Egypt and other surrounding Arab countries, or even inside the Palestinian occupied territories. In 2017 alone, patients, mainly cancer patients, actually have died just waiting for Israel to just to issue those permits. And furthermore, we suffer from frequent electricity blackouts. Sometimes these blackouts, amount to 20 hours per day. So you can imagine what kind of life we lead and how much we go through tension and daily hardships and burdens. We have to worry about the electricity so that we can charge our phones and electronic devices. We can do even the laundry or even study, do the simplest thing. And unfortunately, so many Palestinians cannot afford subscribing to generators due to the highly expensive cost. So many, resort to using candles, which result eventually in burning the house down over the heads of the children. And it happened. So many tragedies happened in Gaza where children died. In addition to the fact that 97% of water we use is undrinkable and it's unfit for human use. Moreover, the siege destroyed our economics. The unemployment rate in Gaza has risen to 70% among youth, resulting in shutting down so many industries. And according to a UN report, Israel's military operations and a prolonged closure of Gaza has caused economic damage of $16.7 billion between 2007 and 2018. Gaza also has been a testing field for Israel, as Israel wages belligerent operations repeatedly, leaving hundreds dead, thousands injured, and tens of thousands of homes and facilities destroyed either completely or partly. I myself have experienced 4 fatal assaults, the latest of which was, last May, last year. And to me, it was the worst and the toughest. It was horrible. And the first one I experienced, actually, I was in the 6th grade. I was like 11 years old only. And it was the first time I had experienced such terror. In that aggression, I lost one of my cousins. And my family couldn't even get together to mourn over him because Israeli helicopters, US imported, and made helicopters and drones would target every person, in streets, every moving vehicle. We just couldn't go and mourn, and we felt deeply concerned and deeply sad. That, kind of assaults happen all the time. Like it happened in 2008, it happened in 2012, 2014, and finally 2021. And I hope it will not happen again. Everything around us tells us that we are refugees, that we are afflicted with so much pain and misery, and that we are made to lead an abnormal life, actually. Even when we peacefully protest, as what happened in the Great Return March in 2018, we went out and marched to the streets and asked for the implementation of the Resolution 194 that was issued by the UN's General Assembly, and it basically entitles the Palestinian refugees to return to our served homelands, from which we were ethnically cleansed back in 1948, in addition to the compensation for our losses. We were met with Israeli violence and live ammunition. 280 protesters, civilian, peaceful protesters were killed, including children, elderly, disabled, journalists, paramedics, women, even, of all people of all ages and all walks of life. So nonetheless, I think that we Palestinians are still standing to our ground because we believe in justice, freedom, equality, and dignity, and that's what we aspire to achieve in the coming years, hopefully, when we are still alive. Not because we don't wish for our children and our grandchildren to live the life we're leading right now, and what happened with our grandfathers in 1948 and 1967. Hopefully everything is going to be just fine, and the apartheid system that Israel has developed in the Palestinian territories has to be dismantled. And I'm really proud and privileged to talk to you from South Africa, because your struggle against apartheid has been a strong and massive source of inspiration for our struggle here against apartheid Israel.
Yes, I think there are a lot of parallels which you can draw between apartheid South Africa and apartheid Israel. We've done that constantly, just in terms of even the laws and the legislation is very, very similar. It's the lack of freedom of movement, inability to own land, and it's even worse for people in Gaza, as you mentioned, that they're not even able to leave the place. It is essentially an open air prison, and it sounds like life there is very, very tough, but despite all of that, people in Gaza are still they're maintaining their resilience, and they're continuing to resist, and the resistance of the Palestinians is something that is very awe-inspiring for the rest of us. And you are a teacher yourself, so can you tell us a little bit about what it's like, a day-to-day in your life in Gaza, living under siege, as a young person, just going out and being an educator and a teacher, and what that is like?
Of course, living in the Gaza Strip under this kind of siege and under kind of this very hard life conditions makes it very difficult for us to practice our daily activities and to go to work and educate ourselves, even at universities, because despite the fact that we go through a lot of hardships and we are subjected constantly to massacres, assaults, hermetic siege, collapsed economics, lack of jobs and employment, many of us actually suffer from psychological disorder, we suffer from anxiety, we suffer from depression, and we lack psychological support programs. But at the same time, I always say that Gaza is a place where you can describe hope as an industry. In fact, despair is not an option for us. Maybe it's a luxury that people in other places on this planet can have. But if you let despair find its way to your soul, then you're done. And I always say that Palestinians in Gaza are like phoenix. They just rise from their ashes. And but the very lovely thing about us is that the mere existence is a resistance, and we always choose to wake up and to resist, to practice our daily events, to look for life, because we do love life, and we don't wish to be massacred. We don't wish to be crushed under these kind of circumstances. Many of us choose to write about the humanist side of our stories, especially because we are dehumanized and rendered as mere statistics in news and reports. So, for example, you can see the We're Not Numbers organization, which is non-profit. It's a non-profit organization. It renders a platform for Palestinian youth to write about their life, about love, about despair, about hope, about everything they could they can feel, because this is part of our Palestinian narrative. But also, we engage in different forms of resistance, such as the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, BDS, because it's one of the very peaceful ways that enable us the opportunity to resist while we are here. We choose to boycott our occupied products, because we know very well that every time we buy something from the Israeli occupation, then it means that we contribute to sustaining and maintaining the siege here in Gaza, or to further establish settlements in the West Bank, or to build the apartheid wall in Jerusalem and across the land in the West Bank as well. So, but we also try to find political, let's say, solutions. And to me, the word solution is not really accurate, because our problem is with the root of Zionism. The suffering of Palestinians cannot end without ending the Zionist project, because it's a political expansionist movement that is based on the ethno-racial supremacy of Jews over Palestinians, over Arabs, and we try to to face this kind of mentality, and at the same time we want to call for ending the call for a two-state solution, because it's very racist. Israel has more than 70% of the historic Palestinian land, while we are here left to have less than actually 22% of the historic Palestine. So, as I said, despair is not an option for Palestinians in Gaza. We have to wake up every day, and we have to go and undertake our daily activities, try to find out ways in which we can survive, hopefully without having to go through another fourth or a fifth war aggression by Israel.
No, definitely. Thank you so much, Aya, for joining us and just giving us an idea of what your life in Gaza is like, just day to day. And it's very inspiring to hear the ways in which you and all of the other Palestinians living under siege have kept hope alive. And like you said, if we do despair, then the resistance is lost, because that's when we lose everything. Is there anything else you would like to mention before we move on to our next item on the program?
Actually, it's an open invitation for the people across the world who love freedom, who are, who chant for and advocate for human dignity everywhere. If you want to join our struggle, you can join our boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. You can read about the Palestinian stories from your numbers. You can, join us in our Twitter storming and campaigns to call for this dismantlement of Israeli regime. But also, you can ask your governments to stop and to sever all ties with Israel until it stops its war crimes and crimes against humanity and complies with international law, as happened with apartheid South Africa last century. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here, Aya. I definitely agree with you. I think the BDS movement is so incredibly important, and it's like we've spoken about before on the show. It's one of the main ways in which South Africa was able to overcome the discriminatory and racist system of apartheid here. So it's so important that we push for BDS for Palestinians as well. Before we move on to the next item on our program, which is listening to Maher Zain's "Palestine Will Be Free" song, I would just like to acknowledge the viewers who have joined us on ITV. Thank you so much for joining us on this very, very important show commemorating the 74th anniversary of the Nakba.
Every day we tell each other that this day will be the last, and tomorrow we all can go home free, and all this will finally end. Palestine, tomorrow will be free. Palestine, tomorrow will be free. no father to wipe away my tears. That's why I will cry. I feel scared, but I won't show my fears. I keep my head high, deep in my heart. I never have any doubt that Palestine tomorrow will be free. Palestine tomorrow will be free. I saw those rockets and bombs shining in the sky, like drops of rain in the sun's light, taking away everyone dear to my heart, destroying my dreams in a blink of an eye. What happened to our human rights? What happened to the sanctity of life and all those other lives? I know that I'm only a child, but is your conscience still alive? Oh, yeah. I will caress with my bare hands every precious grain of sand, every stone and every tree. 'Cause no matter what they do, they can never hurt you. 'Cause your soul will always be free.
سؤالي للعالم، لكل إنسان في العالم، لكل إنسان بينعم بحريته. ليش إحنا بنتحاصر؟ يعني شو عملنا؟ شو ذنب شعب كامل يتحاصر داخل حدود ضيقة لأسباب هو مش عارفها؟ يعني تهيألي إحنا ما عملنا إشي نتحاصر عليه أو نحبس عليه.
Palestine tomorrow will be free. Palestine tomorrow will be free.
Will be free. We are now going to chat to Comrade Mafa Kwanisai from Zimbabwe. Comrade Mafa is the chairman of the Zimbabwe Palestine Solidarity Council, which is an umbrella body that coordinates all Palestine solidarity activities in Zimbabwe. He is also the founder of the Zimbabwe movement of Pan-African socialists that advocates for the total unification of Africa, which is an anti-colonial and anti-imperialism movement. He writes in support of land reform in Zimbabwe and encourages other African or oppressed nations to embark on this revolution. He's also an anti-sanctions advocate against Zimbabwe and other nations such as Cuba, Iran, and Venezuela. He does a lot of solidarity work with Palestine, Cuba, Venezuela, and also in Zimbabwe. He works at the Midland State University in Gweru and is the patron of Zimbabwe Congress of Student Union at the university. He is also a member of the Pan-African Palestine Solidarity Network, of which PSA is also a part of, and he attended its Solidarity Conference in Dhaka, Senegal this year in March. Hello, Comrade Mafa. Thank you so much for joining us. So, sorry, Comrade, I can't hear you. We're just going to sort out some technical difficulties. Comrade Mafa, can you hear me? No, we can't seem to reach Comrade Mafa. We're just going to cut to a quick 2-minute video while we just sort out the technical issues. So we're just going to watch a video which talks about the Nakba a little bit more.
May 14th, 1948. The British mandate in Palestine is about to expire. David Ben-Gurion proclaims the birth of the State of Israel. The next day, the 5 neighboring Arab countries declare war.
The city of Haifa and its harbor become the center of bitter conflict as the new Jewish state is born in the tense atmosphere of civil war.
During the Arab-Israeli War of 1948, more than 700,000 Palestinians are forced into exile. It's the Nakba, which means catastrophe in Arabic.
Haganah forces seek out every Arab, and barricades are set up to screen those who had not already fled the city. Everyone is searched.
The Haganah, a paramilitary organization, forms the core of Israeli forces and is responsible for expelling Palestinians. Some leave on their own to escape the violence. Their lands and houses are seized. Most flee to Gaza, Jordan, Lebanon, or Syria. On December 11, 1948, the United Nations adopts a resolution for the right of return for these Palestinian refugees, but Israel has never given its permission. 70 years later, Ibrahim Mahmoud still lives in the Jalazon camp north of Ramallah. He was 17 when he had to leave his native village, which is now in Israeli territory.
We went to the mountains and we spent 4 or 5 nights there. People were lost, like sheep without a shepherd. I promise before God that we will go home. We have to go home.
Every May 14th, the Israelis celebrate the creation of their state, while the following day, Palestinian refugees and their children commemorate the Nakba. They've never abandoned their hope of returning to their village.
One day, we'll come back to our land and we'll have rights again. We'll continue to resist until we get it all back.
This Palestinian family holds on tightly to that precious symbol of their right to return, the key to the house they were forced to abandon 70 years ago.
That was also just a short video which delved a little bit into just the history of the Nakba. We are going to try and connect with Comrade Mafa again. Hello, Comrade Mafa, can you hear me?
Yes, comrade, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us. Comrade Mafa is joining us from Zimbabwe. Comrade, can you speak to us a little bit about mobilizing in Zimbabwe and the Palestine Solidarity Movement in Zimbabwe, and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing on the ground there?
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me to the show. As you have just heard from the introduction, I'm the chairman of the Zimbabwe Palestine Solidarity Council. And one of our objectives of the council here is to support and promote the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. One of our another objective is to build solidarity and mutual understanding between the people of Zimbabwe and Palestine, and also to raise awareness in Zimbabwe of Israel's occupation of Palestinian refugees and to strengthen the Palestinian citizens of Israel for equal rights. We're also developing and coordinating support for the Palestinian rights through the media, trade groups, government, students, youth, the civil society, and the general public. The composition of Zimbabwe Palestine Solidarity Council is comprised of student movements, representatives from the political parties, representatives from the workers' unions, representatives from the youth organizations, representatives from the faith-based organizations in the Muslim community. One of the mandates of our organizations is to organize events across Zimbabwe, which is to sensitize the majority of Zimbabwe on the predicament and the struggle of the Zimbabwe people. These events are meant to give a truthful picture of the nature of Israel's apartheid on Palestine, which the global Western media is distorting, misrepresenting, and ignored deliberately. People here in Zimbabwe are bombarded daily by lies and myths by the Western corporate media. The media in the Western world has been sold the myth and the lies that Israel is the victim of this conflict, and it is only defending itself against terrorists. The current events in Palestine dispel and shatter this myth. Apartheid Israel is not a victim, but an occupier of Palestine. The clashes are between issues of land and nationhood. Unfortunately, many of us still think that criticizing Israel is interpreted as criticizing Judaism or Christianity. The conflicts or the clashes which are happening in apartheid Israel are not about race, between Jews and Arabs, or between Islam and Christians. The conflict is about land theft and colonialism. Israel is a state built on the destruction of another state, which is Palestine. On the 18th of March, the Zimbabwe Palestine Solidarity Council, we are organizing an event in the city of Gweru. We're going to invite the ambassador of the state of Palestine here in Zimbabwe. We are going to invite the government officials, representatives from the political parties, youth organizations, student organizations. Well, we believe that Nakba did not end in 1948. The ethnic cleansing of historic Palestine, we believe, is still happening. As we can all see on the television, people are being killed with impunity. And we are also concerned about the silence, even of the international community, especially the United Nations, which has been very silent about this genocide since the issue of Palestine was brought before the United Nations 74 years ago. Palestine has been suffering from Israel apartheid system since 1940, which has resulted in oppression and the dehumanization, repression of Palestinian people. For the past 74 years, the Palestinian people are suffering. More than 1 billion Palestinians living in occupied West Bank and other areas. They are daily facing home demolitions. They are facing arrests. They are being displaced as Israel is expanding its Jewish colonies by selling the Palestinian land. Palestinians are restricted daily through military checkpoints and by the separation wall, which they are continuing to build and expanding, which is obstructing their ability of people to travel safely. And we believe, as Africans who are giving solidarity to the people of Palestine, we believe that the only way to end Nakba is to continue resisting and to resist. Because all other alternatives on the table, it looks like they're not bearing fruit. Dialogue is not bearing fruit. So we are very inspired by the level of resistance which is escalating in Palestine. We are also convinced that Africans can never enjoy the fruits of their liberation until the Palestinian people are also liberated from racism, apartheid, and Israel occupation. Because as Zimbabwe, as you know, Zimbabwe was born out of a protracted struggle against colonialism, fighting for land. So the struggle of the people of Palestine and the struggle of the people of Zimbabwe, it also makes us ideological twins. Was we all suffered, and we are still suffering from Western imperialism. Was we believe that the apartheid state of Israel was created by Western imperialism, which was deliberately done to make sure that the interests of Western imperialism in the Middle East are protected. That's why you find that the United States of America, it develops cold feet. Rather, it is continuing to send billions of taxpayers' money to put up the state of the apartheid system in Israel, and it's also sending arms and guns, those weapons which are being used to kill the Palestinian people. And as you know, it's the same Western imperialism which is punishing the people of Zimbabwe for setting a good example that land can be taken back. Revolution can actually reverse the economic interests of imperialism. We are being punished by economic sanctions here just because we had the audacity and the courage to take back our land. Mm-hmm. So these sanctions are meant to send a clear sign to the war-oppressed world, which includes Palestine, that if you dare demand to take back your land, this is what will happen to you, and giving Zimbabwe an example. So Western imperialism, instead of putting sanctions against Israel, is putting sanctions on Zimbabwe. We are pushing that if possible through our lobby, that United Nations, through the Security Council, must intervene and deal decisively with the issue of Palestine, which has been dilly-dallying for many years, and also to reignite the apartheid mechanism, which was formed especially when South Africa was under apartheid. That system must also be reignited so that it deals decisively with the apartheid system which is prevailing in Israel. We are also lobbying SADC, the African Union, to make sure that they fight against the inclusion or the accreditation of Israel to the African Union. Because we believe that a colonizer cannot get membership in an organization which was formed to decolonize Africa. Yes. So African leaders, those who are voting to Israel, we believe it's a total betrayal of the principles and ethos of our liberation struggle. Was we fought against colonialism, and it would be very paradoxical or ironically to grant the observer status to a colonizer. And here in Zimbabwe, we'd like to thank our government for standing with the people of Israel when actually in international organizations like United Nations, African Union, SADC, whenever the issue of Palestine is brought to be discussed on the table. And equally, we'd like to also to thank the media in Zimbabwe. We have got a polarized media here in Zimbabwe, but I'm happy that on the issue of the question of Palestine, both the private and the public media, they stand shoulder to shoulder. They report consistently exposing the atrocities which are being perpetrated against the people of Palestine. And also, we also live by the conviction that the Palestinian struggle and the struggle for international human solidarity is a just struggle. And we believe we will be victorious in the end. For our freedom is yet incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people. Palestine from the river Jordan to the Red Sea shall be free during our lifetime. If we manage to dismantle apartheid in South Africa and colonialism in Zimbabwe. What now can stop us from liberating Palestine? It is very possible. And I'm glad, like I said, that I'm just from the conference which we attended in Senegal.
Mm-hmm.
A conference brought together activists from 41 countries in Africa. And it was also agreed that we must strengthen and consolidate our networks to make sure that Africa is protected from the Israel penetration. We are witnessing that there are so many African nations. Which are really normalizing, which are starting to normalize relations with Israel on areas of intelligence, on areas of agriculture, on areas of scholarships. Even our Pentecostal churches here in Zimbabwe, there are some Israel agents here who are now recruiting church leaders and bishops, taking them on a pilgrimage to Israel, and telling a myth or a lie that the apartheid state of Israel is the Holy Land. So in terms of their spiritual revival, they must get there. And it is that kind of mentality now where we feel as Africans we needed to venture and to educate people properly that it's not about a religion. The crimes perpetrated against the Palestinian people, they are crimes against humanity. So across every religions, their mandate, they are based on moral principles, they are based on human rights, they are based on equality. So this issue, no matter how the Israeli lobbyists and propagandists are trying to portray that the war or the conflict they are having is about religion or is about race, that's a lie, that's a myth. Because recently we have read in the news that the Israelis were attacking even the Christians when they were gathering to pray. They also attacked the Muslims when they were praying in the Al-Aqsa mosque. So it exposes the myths and the lies which the Israeli propagandists are trying to sell to the people. So it's a mentality which we feel here in Zimbabwe. We must work with the churches, the church leadership, and try to educate them that we are not fighting the Israel which they believe in. It's a myth. It's a state which is created which is perpetrating apartheid to the people of Palestine. So in doing this, to raising this consciousness amongst the masses, we do public lectures in universities where we invite prominent people who have the correct knowledge about what is happening in occupied Palestine to come and teach our students, having questions and answers. Like I said, we are working with the media in Zimbabwe, which is very cooperative in supporting the Palestinian cause, also educating people through the media. We are also reaching out to political parties, parliamentary portfolios of foreign affairs, to make sure that the issue of Palestine is debated even in our parliaments. We also talk to our Minister of Foreign Affairs to make sure that the issue of Palestine, each time it is brought up in SADC caucuses, in African Union caucuses, even at the United Nations level, we must not betray the people of Palestine, and we must continue to stand with them. So this is the kind of work in terms of mobilization, in terms of building solidarity in Zimbabwe. And also I would like to thank the the embassy of Palestine here in Zimbabwe is very, very, very supportive of our efforts, and never before in Zimbabwe. This time we've seen that most of the lobby, it has intensified. The anti-Israel sentiment, anti-apartheid Israel sentiment in Zimbabwe is growing, and we also think that if in building these networks, we admire the kind of solidarity work in Kenya and in Palestine, and we feel that as a budding solidarity movement in Zimbabwe, we need your support. We need to build synergies. We need to strengthen our networks, and we have programs of this nature, so that we can, which I believe these programs, that they can build a collaboration and build stronger networks, and reach out even more to other countries like Zambia and other countries which have never built a strong solidarity movement. I think that is the purpose of this Pan-African Palestine Solidarity network which has been formed, so that we rally all the 55 nations of Africa and try to build solidarity so that we defend Africa in the penetration of Israel, which is bringing agricultural solutions which we believe is going to kill our natural sustainable agricultural systems here. They want to bring us drip irrigation technologies as if we are in a desert, like in Zimbabwe with a lot of water. So why should we build corporations with corporations in the areas of drip irrigation? Yet those systems are good in desert areas, and Zimbabwe is not a desert. So we've been questioning the recent meeting of the Minister of Agriculture here, and the consul Israel consular representative here on areas of cooperation on agricultural technologies. We have got many dams, we've got many water bodies. So what do we learn from drip irrigation, or what gains should we get from the drip irrigation? So it's only a way of trying to win the hearts and minds of government to get relevant. So I think, in short, this is what we are doing here in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And we look forward to more collaborations, to building more networks.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Comrade Mafa. I particularly liked what you said about how, as Africans, we cannot enjoy our freedom until we see the freedom of the Palestinians. And I think it really links us to what Nelson Mandela said, that, you know, we're not truly free. We cannot enjoy our freedom until we see the freedom of the Palestinians as well. And I completely agree with you, Comrade, on how the struggles of Africa are linked to Palestinian struggles, and how it is very much an anti-apartheid, anti-colonial, anti-imperial, and it's a land struggle. And that's really why it's so important for us to show solidarity with the Palestinians in Africa. And you did mention that there is going to be a protest happening on the 18th. Can you give our viewers a little bit of information about that, and how we in other countries can support you in that protest? Are you still there, Comrade? Okay, it seems that we have, yes, Comrade Mafa.
Yeah, I think my phone, my network is a bit problematic here.
Not a problem. I just wanted you to give us, yes, just a bit more information on the Nakba protest that you mentioned is happening in Zimbabwe on the 18th. And could you tell us more about that, and how we as the global community can support and show solidarity with you there?
Okay, the events which are organizing, like I said, we are going to have a march in the morning in the main street of Guero, and after that we are going to have a gathering where we are going to have poems, art exhibitions, which portray the situation which is obtaining in Palestine today. It's going to be in the form of paintings and sculptures. It's an open air exhibition where people in town can just pass through and have some people to explain to them what this art means. And on that very special day, we are also going to have presentations from the members of the Muslim community. We are going to have presentations from the students, from the youth. Myself representing the Palestine Solidarity Council, I'm going also to give a speech. Then the provincial minister, who is an equivalent of your premier there in South Africa, is going to be there to represent the government so that they hear our concerns. We're also going to have presentations from the Christian community to condemn the barbaric act which the Apartheid settler government is doing. Then the ambassador also is going to say something. Then I think after that, we are going to have a press conference with the members of the 40 states. And I think after that, that will be the end of the event. But we believe every day it's a struggle. We'll continue to write articles. We'll continue to work with the members of the media to continue daily to expose the atrocities of the apartheid Israel. I think that's the program.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Okay, thank you so much, Comrade Mafa, for that. That was Comrade Mafa Kwanisai, who joined us from Zimbabwe to tell us a little bit about the solidarity work that is being done on the ground in Zimbabwe. And he gave us a lot of very pertinent points about the issue of how African solidarity is so incredibly important because we in Africa are still ruling from the effects of colonialism and from the effects of in South Africa apartheid, and it's very much important for us to ensure that we show solidarity to the Palestinians because in Africa we are very much aware of the atrocities of colonialism and of apartheid and how that affected the people here. We do have 2 comments that we'd like to read out before we move on to the next part of our program. So from Paul, who says, we condemn the atrocities and stand with the people of Palestine in their total fight for sovereignty. And the second one is from Shireen, who says, Aluta continua. We're now going to play a short video which focuses on the funeral of Shireen Abu Akleh, who was a journalist murdered and assassinated by the Israeli Defense Force. And this video will talk a little bit on her funeral, which was yesterday. And after that, we will chat to Aziz Younis, who is joining us here in South Africa. So that was a video which just showed some scenes from the funeral of Shireen, and it's just absolutely horrifying to watch and see what was happening. It just shows us that, you know, Israel's violence is all-encompassing and that it doesn't discriminate in who it targets, may it be women, children, the elderly, or journalists, and you know that no one is really safe in occupied Palestine, whether dead or alive. We are now joined by Aziz Younis, who is a Palestinian journalist with Al Jazeera. Salams, Aziz, how are you doing?
Walaikum assalam, alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Aziz, as a journalist yourself, and you know, you also work for Al Jazeera, can you tell us a little bit about just watching that video or just watching the events unfold in the past week? How did that make you feel, and what are your thoughts on everything that's happening?
I mean, I've seen that video maybe 100 times by now. By every time it gives you like a goosebumps. It's a horrific video, to be honest. Shireen was a colleague. She was a mentor. She was a great human being. She was a brilliant journalist. I grew up like listening to her reports, even her, in like, you know, the last part of her reports when she says like Shireen Abu Aqla, Al Jazeera, the occupied Jerusalem, it just like it's so memorable. Her closing line with her calm voice and melodious way of saying it, and then you see that that scene of the casket, you know, falling on the ground. It's just outrageous, to be honest. I don't know. It's horrific video. Whether you work with Al Jazeera, whether you're Muslim, Christian, whether you Palestinian or not, it's just a horrific video.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's just the absolute disrespect that was displayed by the Israeli regime there. And, you know, there were instances where you saw Israeli soldiers just yanking off the Palestinian flag, off her casket, and also from the hearse that was carrying her. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? And, you know,
so basically, after the horrific scene, the videos that we also of murdering Shireen by a very trained sniper. As you guys know, she was wearing a bulletproof vest, covering her neck, body as well, and a helmet. So a very trained sniper killed her in the area that is exposed, was like a very tiny area here behind the ear. And then her body moving from Jenin to Nablus to Ramallah and then to Jerusalem. And then they didn't stop there. They didn't just like, you know, we killing her, like, but this is the Israeli, you know, nature. They went on with trying to stop the funeral. But one of the most like amazing things that keeps like, you know, reminding us that this regime lives in fear, the fear of the flag. They literally opened the ambulance that was holding Shireen's body, and they tried to rip it off because it was wrapped with the Palestinian flag. I mean, the emboldenment of a settler colonial regime and the failure of the international community to really protect and safeguard not just like normal life of any Palestinians, but like journalistic integrity is so obvious in this in these pictures.
yeah, definitely. I mean, we have spoken in just about just how non-discriminatory Israel is, and it's doesn't hesitate in who it targets. You know, maybe children, women, the elderly, or even journalists who are wearing a press vest, and even that is not enough to save them. And Shireen is unfortunately not the first one, and there have been many journalists who have been murdered by the Israeli regime. So can you talk to us a little bit about media freedom in Palestine and what exactly it's like to be able to, as a Palestinian, be able to like do your job, which is to tell the world the truth about Israel's settler colonialism and legal occupation?
We know that every person in Palestine, whether it's a doctor, whether it's an engineer, journalist, they have a strong resilience way of fighting this occupation. And we do believe that journalists, they do have one of the great positions of holding the truth. Shireen murder was a testament of the impunity that Israel feels. Nobody, not a journalist, not a politician, not a child, is safe. But also, we do know that, and Shireen, actually in off record and on record, many times Shireen said she knows that it's a very dangerous duty. It's very dangerous work to do. With as a journalist in general, it's very dangerous work to do in the Middle East, but also as a journalist that covers one of the most outrageous, brutal occupation in the history now. We know that your life is in your hand, if that's the right correct term, every day. Shireen, actually, a couple of days before her murder, she told one of the colleagues that, she felt that this is her message to the world, that if I leave my house today, I know that either I deliver the message or something will happen to me. But on that day, Shireen was the message. She delivered herself to prove to the world that this occupation has to end. We don't just require a private investigation. We don't want just people to feel pity for us. I mean, we were constantly being asked, what is your demand? What are your demands as Palestinian? And we've been echoing our demands for decades. Freedom. It's not just a chant from the river to the sea. This is our right. And also the international community is easily allowing Israel to get away. The other day we saw what happened in Ukraine and the invasion of Russia. A journalist got killed and murdered there. The whole world was talking about it. We as a Palestinian, you have to convince the world every day that, listen, I'm being killed, I'm being murdered, and we have to prove ourselves to the world that this is happening to us. It's a double standard, obvious, situation here.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, unfortunately, there is a massive disparity in how the world is reacting to the atrocities in Ukraine. And, when we make these comparisons, we're not saying that what's happening in Ukraine is any less important than what's happening in Palestine. What we are trying to say is that is just as equally important, in that in making that comparison, Palestine should then also be given as much of importance and as much thought when people are talking about war crimes, when people are talking about human rights violations, because they have been going on in Palestine since the start of the Nakba and even before then. So, these atrocities have been ongoing for 74 years. And, we see that the international community is definitely more, it seems that they are more outraged by the killing of an Ukrainian journalist than they are by the killing of a Palestinian one. And, what is it that makes Shireen different to the Ukrainian journalist who was killed? Is it just the color of her skin, the color of her eyes? These are things that we need to think about. Aziz, your family lives in Jordan, if I'm correct.
My immediate family.
Yeah, so can you give us, if you don't mind, a little bit of, since the show is about the Nakba and we're talking about the ongoing Nakba and just and how it has affected the lives of the Palestinians. So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the history of your family and how they ended up in Jordan, and can they return? Is it possible for them to return to Palestine? Just the situation around
that. After the 48, my grandfather left, or was kicked actually from Jenin, and we end up in Jordan. We're not allowed back to Palestine. Obviously, we do have a house, we do have a land. If you go there, then you have to reclaim that land and ask for it. So I've never been to Palestine. It's a dream, and I always told my South African friends, you are privileged, you are allowed to go to Palestine, and as a Palestinian, I've never seen it. One of the best birthday gifts I had, a friend of mine who is allowed to go to Palestine, went there to my house and recorded a video from my house saying that hopefully next year or the year before, year after, we'll see you here. So yeah, you always feel that something is not complete until this occupation ends. Not because I'm a Palestinian, I want to go back there, which is important, but also because this atrocity has to end. I mean, today is not not the reminder of what happened in massacres by Zionist terrorist militia 74 years ago. Today is a testament that after 74 years, the name Palestine in Abdul Aziz's heart or any Palestinian is still loud, is still defiant and persistent in honoring the sanctity of freedom. And what we hope for, that may the Nakba, inshallah, be no more.
I mean, I just got chills when you spoke about how your friend videoed the house and sent that to you. And I think it's just so incredibly heartbreaking to know that there's so many Palestinians out there who have just been living for such a long time, just waiting to go back home. And one of the videos that we showed earlier, the family actually showed the keys to their house. And I think that's why the key is such a big symbol of resistance for Palestinians. It shows that, that they're still holding on and that hope is still there, and that one day, inshallah, that they will return. Thank you so much for joining us today, Aziz. Is there anything else you would like to add or before we close up the program?
Thank you so much for having me. I just wanted to say one last thing. I know for a fact that we will see Palestine free in our lifetime, inshallah. We saw what happened that when apartheid fell in South Africa, and inshallah we will see it soon. But we need to be persistent, be constant, and I mean, if you get bored by someone is talking about Palestine every day, this is our life. We see it every day. We are forced to. So keep us in your dua, keep us in your message, in your writing, in your videos, and hopefully, inshallah, we'll go to Palestine soon all together.
I mean, definitely. As someone who is a part of this movement, we always say that it's going to happen in our lifetime, and it'll happen soon. Thank you so much, Aziz.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Aziz Younis, who joined us from South Africa, just talking to us a little bit about his experience as a journalist, what it's like just reporting and trying to get the truth out there, but also touching on how he feels as a Palestinian watching the day-to-day atrocities that are committed against the people of Palestine by the illegal apartheid regime of Israel, which continues to occupy Palestinian land and ensure that in day-to-day laws and legislation, but also just day-to-day practices, that the Palestinians, one, don't live a very good life, as Aya mentioned, and she spoke about her life in Gaza and how difficult it is without water, without electricity, safe water to drink. As South Africans, we're so privileged, we can open up the tap, we can grab a glass of water, and it's just something that we take for granted and we don't really think about. But for people living in Gaza, that is something that they do not have access to. So they don't have access to basic human rights, and it's so difficult for them there. And it's in practices like that Israel ensures that it continues to make the lives of Palestinians harder, and that it continues its illegal occupation through small things like not having, making sure that stopping electricity going to Gaza. The continuous bombing in Gaza has ensured that there is a destruction of infrastructure there, which affects the lives of the Palestinians who live there. So it's small things like that that have that are continuing to ensure that the Nakba isn't something that a grand event that happened in 1948, but it's something that happens continuously, not just through the settler colonialism, but through other practices like that. We had Comrade Mahmoud who spoke about the 8 villages that are currently under threat of settler colonialism, and he spoke about how there is an ongoing campaign to safeguard these villages. There is going to be a hearing in the Israeli courts on the 15th of July. So as the Solidarity Movement, we need to ensure that we amp up the international pressure and ensure that these villages are not ethnically cleansed of the indigenous people of Palestine who have lived there for generations and who are now under threat of losing the homes that their great grandfathers and grandmothers lived in. So as someone who is a part of the Solidarity Movement, I would like to call on you as a supporter of a free Palestine to put more pressure, firstly, on your government and call for boycotts, to call for disinvestment and call for sanctions, but also to get involved. One of the ways in which we can ensure that we continue the work for the liberation of a free Palestine is to be active in our solidarity, especially as a young person. Join a human rights club in your school or start one. Reach out to us and see how we can support you. Join the Palestine Solidarity committee that's on your campus, or reach out to the Palestine Solidarity committees that exist in your area, which they do. We have Palestine Solidarity organizations all across South Africa, in Durban, Cape Town, Stellenbosch, Johannesburg, Pretoria. And if there isn't one, then be proactive in the work in your activism and start one. Reach out to the existing Palestine Solidarity organizations and ask them for help. Reach out to the South African BDS Coalition and see how they can support you. It's through our continuous effort that we will be able to bring about a free and liberated Palestine, and it is through our work and the work of the Palestinian resistance fighters on the ground that people like Aziz will be able to finally go back to their family home, a home which we also take for granted, a home that they can only envision through videos and pictures, but a home which is very much not accessible to them because of Israel's settler colonialism and because of Israel's apartheid and continued human rights violations against the Palestinian people. Before I sign off, I would like to thank Salam Media for giving the PSA this opportunity to host this incredible show. Thank you to Ponti from Salam Media for being just absolutely amazing and helping us with all of the technical stuff, and also to ITV for picking up our stream and showing it to their viewers. Thank you so much to everyone who watched this show. It's so incredibly important that we engage in programs like this and continue to learn about the history of Palestine and learn about the stories and lived experience of the Palestinians, and also for us to continue our solidarity and the work that we're doing. If you would like to be more involved, please send us an email. It's info@palestinesa.co.za, or you can find more information on our website, which is www.palestinesa.co.za. You can also find us on social media. Our Instagram handle is PSA_South Africa. We are also on Twitter and Facebook. Please reach out to us, stay connected, and inshallah one day in our lifetime we will see a free Palestine. Assalamu alaikum.
I wrote this poem when we were doing a direct action at my university, and there were Palestinian citizens and Israeli soldiers, and and I'm very petty about these things, so I said I will only be a Palestinian. I refuse to be a settler or a soldier. So I was lying on the ground, and this guy came and kicked me in the guts and said, "You deserve to be raped before you have your terrorist children." At the time I said nothing, but then I wrote this poem for this young gentleman. اسمحوا لي أن أتكلم بلساني العربي قبل أن يحتلوا لغتي أيضاً. Allow me to speak my Arab tongue before they occupy my language as well. Allow me to speak my mother tongue before they colonize her memory as well. I am an Arab woman of color, and we come in all shades of anger. All my grandfather ever wanted to do was wake up at dawn and watch my grandmother kneel and pray in a village hidden between Yafa and Haifa. My mother was born under an olive tree on a soil they say is no longer mine, but I will cross their barriers, their checkpoints, their damn apartheid walls, and return to my homeland. I am an Arab woman of color, and we come in all shades of anger. And did you hear my sister screaming yesterday as she gave birth at a checkpoint with Israeli soldiers looking between her legs for their next demographic threat? Called her baby girl Janine. And did you hear Amne Muna screaming behind their prison bars as they tear-gassed her cell? We are returning to Palestine. I am an Arab woman of color, and we come in all shades of anger. But you tell me this womb inside of me will only bring you your next terrorist. Beard-wearing, gun-waving, towel-head, sand nigger. You tell me I send my children out to die, but those are your copters, your F-16s in our skies. And let's talk about this terrorism business for a second. Wasn't it the CIA that killed Allende and Lumumba? And who trained Osama in the first place? My grandparents didn't run around like clowns with white capes and white hoods on their heads lynching black people. I am an Arab woman of color, and we come in all shades of anger. So who's that brown woman screaming in a demonstration? Sorry, should I not scream? I forgot to be your every Orientalist dream. Genie in a bottle, belly dancer, harem girl, soft-spoken Arab woman. Yes, master. No, master. Thank you for the peanut butter sandwiches raining down on us from your F-16s, master. Yes, my liberators are here to kill my children and call them collateral damage. I am an Arab woman of color, and we come in all shades of anger. So let me just tell you, this womb inside of me will only bring you your next rebel. She'll have a rock in one hand and a Palestinian flag in the other. I am an Arab woman of color. Beware, beware my anger.